Lion brand basic stitch premium. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video today. I've knit a swatch, I've crocheted a swatch, I've got my knitting and crochet opinions, as well as several knitting and crochet patterns that are recommended for this yarn, as well as an additional new crochet stitch that I came up with and new design that will be out shortly in the next couple of weeks with video tutorials, all using Lion brand basic stitch premium. So if you guys are joining me in the live stream today, make sure you say hi and let me know that you're here. If you're watching the replay, you're going to want to stick around and see what I came up with at the end of this, because it's a super fun little pattern. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the details of this yarn. All right. So here it is. This is Lion brand basic stitch premium, and I put an asterisk here because Lion brand has two basic stitch yarns. I learned that doing research for this yarn. I thought basic stitch was its own yarn. There are two, and I don't know if you guys can see it in the picture because it's kind of small. Right under basic stitch, it says premium. The other basic stitch is anti-pilling. So this one is not marketed as anti-pilling. It is not anti-pilling. It is premium, while the other one is anti-pilling. So I did want to definitely clarify that there are two different ones. I don't want anybody being confused about which yarn I have. I got this in my Lion brand mystery box, and so that's what's kind of prompted these reviews and designs. So this is a worsted weight number 4 medium yarn. It's 100% premium acrylic, which is what the premium comes from, 200 meters or 219 yards per skein, or 100 grams, 3.5 ounces per skein. The recommended needles are 5 millimeter US 8s, which is what I used for my knitting swatch, and then 6 millimeter, which is a US J10, which is what I used for my crochet swatch. This is a machine wash and machine dry yarn, and it retails for $4.99. I snagged that collection of color that you see underneath my picture of my basic stitch from Joann's Fabrics website. So that is where you can get this yarn. You can also get it at some of the other stores. I believe Michael's had it and a couple others as well. This is not one that you can get on the Lion brand website. When I went to their website, they only had this one available in pumpkin orange. So this is definitely one you can get locally. And so let's look at the description on their website. So every crafter needs a favorite go-to yarn, a premium acrylic worsted that is as soft as it is functional. Basic Stitch Premium is machine washable and dryable with excellent stitch definition. This will be the yarn in your stash that you turn to over and over again to make the most unbasic of projects. So let me go ahead and share my experience working with this yarn and my swatches. And oh, I see that Lori's joined us this morning. Good morning, Lori. Thank you for joining me today. So here is the skein. I got 3 of these in my mystery box, and I challenged myself to design something with them. But first, I had to swatch them up to see what it was like. First off, the hand. It feels like a very average acrylic. Now, I will preface that with the fact that I don't work with acrylic as much as I used to in the past, but I did get my hands on quite a bit of acrylic back in the day. And this it feels like your very average acrylic. I don't know that I personally would label it as premium, but maybe this is premium within the Lion brand line of yarn. It feels very basic. I feel like basic stitch is the best way to describe this. It's just your good old basic acrylic. I don't know. Here's my microphone. It has a little bit of crunch to it, not super bad. So while I was knitting with this and crocheting with this, I was using my Addy nickel-plated lace tips for knitting needles. They're also known as rockets, or my color-coded crochet hooks, which are also nickel-plated. So with the nickel-plated needles and hooks, it was mostly okay. And every now and then I would get a little bit of that squeak factor going on. It's not something that I'm used to generally working with animal fibers. It's not as bad as Red Heart Super Saver when you really get that squeak, because I have experienced that. I made a blanket out of it. I couldn't resist the colorway. But this one's not quite like that. I would say it is closer to being a non-squeaking type of acrylic, although I have worked with acrylics that don't squeak at all. So if you have any sort of sensitivity to that kind of noise or feeling that happens when you work with acrylic, this one might not be for you, but it was fine enough to get through my swatches and my project. So it is nice and soft on the skin, and there is a little bit of a fuzzy halo to it, which I think is probably why they came out with an anti-pilling line, because this one does get a little pilly, and we'll see that a little bit more later. So in the skein itself, you can kind of see a little bit of a fuzz around everything. There is a nice high twist on this yarn, so it does get pretty good stitch definition like they recommended in the description. And so here is my knit swatch. It has pretty decent stretch in both directions. And this is at the needle size that they recommended, although I tend to be a tight knitter. So, I mean, maybe you might want to drop down a needle size. And it looks like Lori is asking, would it be good for the Baba hat? So there is a hat pattern called Bobble, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's a knitted hat that has colorwork sheep across right above the ribbing, right up on whatever part that is right above where your ribbing is. It's super cute. It's a great gift hat. It's a great gift knit. And I've knit it using worsted weight acrylics. I think this would be good for that. I would. It is one that over time you might have to depill. It is machine washable and dryable, but that does accelerate the pilling. I don't know after kind of the first initial pilling how much it would do after that, but I will show you. I did send one of my pieces through the dryer, and I'll show you what happened to it. And it looks like Mocha's joining this morning. Good morning, Kim. Thank you so much for joining me live. So I know you got some of this in your box too. So this is the knit swatch. And then my crochet swatch, I did a double crochet with the recommended size. Now, another thing I will say is that it was kind of stiff to like when the swatch was done. But then I did what I do to all of my swatches, which is wet block them basically. So I soak them in a tub with, I call it wool wash, but it doesn't have to be specifically for wool. I actually have it right here. This is my favorite brand. This is Eucalan. And I got the big one because I was so tired of running out of the little ones. And this is totally side related, but my partner has a pair of all wool slippers and they can get a funk to them and you can wash them with this. So he's also been using it. So this is Eucalan in the jasmine scent, which is it smells so good. So I put just a little bit of this in a bucket of warm water, and then I let my pieces soak for 30 minutes to an hour. I give them a gentle squeeze. I lay them flat to dry. After doing that, which is overboard, right? I work with natural fibers primarily, so I'm just used to it. This is machine washable and dryable, so you could do that instead. But it added drape to the fabric. I should have swatched something up and not blocked it. Because on its own, it was kind of just like stiff and floating. But after I blocked it, it gained drape, which is good to know. It has got a good stretch in both directions, and it's very comfortable. So if you can get past that slight squeak to working with it, if you're working with nickel plated, it's not a bad yarn at all. Oh, good morning, Marquita. It looks like Marquita's joined us as well. Good morning, y'all. So that is my crochet swatch. Overall, I feel like basic stitch is the best way to describe this yarn. It is very basic. Coming at $4.99 for the price, it does for me seem a little bit high, but it does come in a nice collection of colors, and I think overall is a very versatile yarn. So I went off to research and see what kind of patterns have people made with this yarn, and what could you make with this yarn if you wanted to give it a try? So let me share those. I'll start with the knitting patterns. Whoops, skipped right past that one. So this one I thought was super cute. So this is a free knitting pattern on Lion Brand's website, Effortless Cardigan. I think you got your basic stitch and your effortless cardigan. What I really like about using this yarn for this pattern is that this is machine washable and dryable. So it's an everyday cardigan that you can throw on. They styled it super sweetly with a dress, so you can kind of dress it up and go out and it's fine. But like me living that mom life, I would just throw that over like pajamas, like sweatpants, oversized shirt, and that cardigan to stay warm. I love its versatility, and it has pockets. Come on, it has pockets. So I thought that was a really cute use of this yarn. I found another knit sweater. This is Olivier. Is that how you say it, by Rohn Strong? This is another free knitting pattern that's available on his website. And it's just a basic top-down raglan sweater. Oh, it might have been bottom-up. I don't want to misspeak. I didn't look over the pattern. You can do raglans bottom-up, but it is seamless. Look at that. It's a seamless raglan sweater, very basic. They styled it, again, with what looks like possibly a dress or a skirt. One of those sweaters that you can dress up or down. I'm very much a jeans girl, so I throw this on with jeans, but you could throw it on over a dress as well. Oh, and it looks like Marquita is asking, what yarn is this? I missed it. This is Lion Brand Basic Stitch Premium. So it's not the anti-pilling, not Basic Stitch anti-pilling. It is Basic Stitch Premium. And yeah, so I really like just the simplicity of this design, basic stitch, simple design, and how amazing that these patterns are free as well. And also, this one is size inclusive. Free size inclusive patterns are hard to come by. And then here is another knitting pattern that I came across that I really thought was just so sweet. It's got this great texture running throughout it. They did a very basic sweater construction, so it doesn't look complicated whatsoever. Like, let's back that up. It looks complicated, but it's actually not, right? Once you learn that basic textured stitch, there's not a lot of shaping to this sweater. You can see that the armholes are just pretty much about the same size as the bottom of the sleeve, so there's probably not any shaping going on because that would be difficult to do in this stitch pattern. It's very, the shape of the pieces in the pattern are very rectangular and basics. So that's how you know that it's going to be something that's pretty easy to make, but it has a really cool effect. And I'm not somebody who typically likes yellow or that golden yellow, but gosh, doesn't that look gorgeous like that? Oh, and Kim is coming in with, it's no big twist, but it's better than Red Heart Super Saver. I would definitely agree with that statement. As much as I can. It is not like Red Heart Super Saver whatsoever, which does justify that its price point is higher than Super Saver, but I have not worked with Big Twist. So I know that does tend to be a lot of people's favorites, and there's been like crazy sales going on at Joann Fabrics for it. So I might have to just get my hands on it just to get that feel, that experience with it. So yeah, this is one of those patterns that is free on their blog, or you can get the ad-free PDF for $6. And I wanted to mention that I really liked how she styled it with the button up. You could definitely throw this one on over a dress or wear it with a high-waisted skirt. Or you could wear it with that cute little button up underneath. I don't think this is one that you could pull off without something high-waisted, just because it is more of a cropped sweater. Unless that is your style, then go for it. It's just not, I like to keep my mom tummy hidden. All right, now we are moving on to the crochet patterns. I really liked this pattern. I'm not one for popcorns or baubles, but I do think that the overall stitch pattern is appealing. I think personally for me, I think I would just eliminate those popcorns. I can't tell if they're popcorns or baubles. But I would just eliminate that texture and leave the rest of the stitch patterning, because I think that it's it's just super cute. So this is the Normandy Gansey Pullover by Melissa Leapman, which is a $6 crochet pattern available on Annie's websites. And if you want any of these patterns, I do have them all linked in the description box below, so you can follow those out. Some of them are on blogs, some of them are on websites, and some of them are Ravelry only. So just kind of be aware before you click on them where it might be taking you to. You can get an idea in the link. So yeah, I really like how basic and simple this one was, but it had a ton of texture. And then I also found this gorgeous blanket. So this is Juliet's November Afghan. It is free on a blog or a $350 PDF. And again, it's just something that's super simple, but is interesting. I think it has a really cute, modern yet vintage vibe to it. And I thought the tassels on the end were cute. It's not something I could pull off at my house because I have cats and they would definitely eat those tassels on a blanket. It wouldn't be happening, but I do think it's a sweet little design. The border outside of the center, not a border, the center of the squares is like this cute little daisy looking circle, but then outside of that, it kind of looks like your granny square style. I think it gives it like modern yet vintage kind of a look. I thought it was super cute. And I do think this yarn would be good for a blanket. So that's why I included it on here. Oh, and Marquita says, my mom tummy really gets in the way of following patterns. Now this Normandy hits right at the hips like I like it. And the texture is nice. Yeah, I feel you there. And the other problem that I have, Marquita, and I don't know if you share with this as well, I like my stuff longer to hide that tummy, but I have wider hips than my bust, like pretty considerably. Even with sewing patterns, I find that I have to grade out a size kind of by hand. I'm one size at the bust and then the next size up at the hips. And that's not as big of a problem with sewing patterns as it is with a stitch pattern in knitting or crochet. And if you don't account for that in your sweater, or you're not making something boxy with a ton of positive ease, it doesn't fit your whole hip and it rides up into your waist and just sits awkwardly. And Marquita says, lovely, lovely Afghan. Yeah, I really think, like, I haven't made a blanket in years. I made a blanket to kind of home welcome my first house. I was renting it. I didn't own it, but it was the first time I lived on my own. Well, I lived with my husband at the time. And I just was like, well, I need to make my own blanket to welcome this house. And that was in 2013. I've worked on blankets, but I haven't finished a blanket since, outside of baby blankets, like this full-size Afghan. Let's see. Lori Manis, 2 rows of that blanket would be a cute shawl. Well, so this one, Lori, is made by, I don't know if you can tell, I'm pretty sure it's made by Square Motifs, but you totally could if you would have to modify it. You'd have to do a little bit of math, but if you could cut one of those square motifs in half and make a triangle version, you could easily modify this into a triangular shawl, and that would be gorgeous. Super pretty. I would definitely want to do it in a much finer weight to definitely take advantage of the lacy appeal to it. And then Marquita says, yes, my hips are wide too. And yes, I lean toward the body patterns too. What do you mean the body patterns? Like the patterning in the body of the sweater? Yeah, yes. I got you. Okay, and then I also found this one. How perfect is this one for the season? Sally Skull's sweater. And this is a $7 crochet pattern. It is a cute little colorwork skull on the body and the sleeves with the stripes. I just love this overall. The only thing that I would be tempted to modify with this pattern is the neckline. I'm not a super big fan of necklines that ride super wide out like that. So I'd probably try to pull that in, but then you would have to curve the front of the neckband down. And I say that because you need to be able to fit your head through the sweater. Depending on the stitches that you're using and the kind of fabric that you're getting with your gauge, you can't have a tiny little neck hole and fit your head through it. It's not possible, which is why sometimes you'll see these, I think they call it boat neck, but I prefer the wide edges pulled in up against my neck and the curve to come down in the front if we need to account for the size of the head. If the the fabric's not stretching at all. But I really loved the skull. And one thing that I also enjoy about this is the skull looks a little long when it's laying flat, but look at how it sits when she's sitting. It curves to her body and it still looks like a skull. It doesn't distort at all. So I thought she did a great job with that. And I'm just ready for spooky season. You guys know me. I love Halloween year round. Pumpkin. I have a pumpkin Halloween themed kitchen. So year round. So I'm here for skull sweatshirts all the time, but especially now. Oh, and now that I'm looking back at the pattern again, also, you can tell that this is another one of those very super basic patterns with a little shaping because of the sleeves. They are very wide bell sleeves. I would probably work to taper that in a bit, you know, decreasing every couple of rows to taper it to my sleeve so that I didn't have all of that space between my wrists that gets to me. You could also add slip stitch ribbing instead of, it looks like she possibly used front post, back post ribbing, which isn't, they call it ribbing. It's not really ribbing. I have a whole rant about that. Slip stitch ribbing is the only true crochet ribbing. It's the only one that actually stretches out and goes back into form. The rest of them are just to imitate the look of knit rib because they don't actually stretch. Let me catch up on the chat here. Oh, we got that one. Marquis said boxy. Yeah, boxy for the fit. I have noticed that boxy style patterns have become very popular because they are closer to a one-size-fits-all type of pattern, and they can be flattering on most people, and they're very easy to design. So I do know that has definitely become a trending thing to do and to make for very obvious reasons. Let's move on to the last one that I found, which is like the completely opposite kind of season. This is like a Valentine's Day kind of looking hat, but how cute is this? This is the Follow Your Heart beanie, and it's a $5.25 crochet pattern. And I included this one because of the stitch. So this one is also a color work pattern. So, and Lori, you had asked earlier about the bobble hat, which with the sheep color work. So here's kind of an idea of what the color work looks like with this yarn. You can see it does have great stitch definition, mostly because of that high twist of the yarn. And this is crocheted, but it looks knit, right? So seasoned crocheters know that this is the waistcoat stitch. Also, I've seen it called the split single crochet. And this is where you work your single crochet, and it has to be in the round where instead of working through the two top loops, you go down into that horizontal or vertical V shape. You're splitting right in that middle of that single crochet to create your next row of single crochet, and it imitates the look of the knit stitch. But because it's a single crochet and not a knit, you don't have as stretchy of a fabric as you get with stockinette. But it is a way to get, if you like the look of knit, but you don't want to learn to knit, you can get it by doing this stitch. And so I included it because that's one of the stitches that I used in my new stitch pattern and design. Marquita says, how cute is that beanie? Looks like my nemesis stitch waistcoat. Yes, you are absolutely correct. And I had never worked the waistcoat stitch before. So let's go ahead and talk about that. I had seen it in tutorials. I had never actually worked it myself. I'm like, oh, that looks easy. You're just putting your hook in a different spot. Let's do this. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go up in recommended hook size and work loosely. That part of your stitch tends to be pretty tight, and it can be difficult to get the head of your hook into that spot. And that will really slow you down if you're used to going through the two loops at the top of your single crochet. There's a nice gap there. And as long as you're working at a decent gauge, it's very easy and comfortable to work into and out of. This waistcoat stitch can be difficult. And even when you do go up in hook size, if you're still pulling tightly, it is still hard to get into. So you just have to relax. If you are familiar at all with the golden loop method or the golden loop in crochet, it's that first loop that you pull up on your hook. Instead of keeping that nice and tight and snug, kind of lift it a little bit. Give a little bit of height to your stitch, and that helps you be able to work into it as well. It's the same concept that goes with slip stitch crochet and slip stitch ribbing, which I talked about as well. That is when you slip stitch in the back loop only. If you do that too tightly, you can't get into those back loops. Same thing, you pop up at least 1 millimeter in size for your hook and you work loosely. You pull up that first loop just a little, you lift it, and that way you can get back into it, and it makes the most wonderful fabric. Marquita is saying, I'm so glad you're sharing these tips. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I will have a video coming out on this crochet stitch as well as the pattern because it is so different. If you guys have been following me at all for a while, you know that I really like to push the envelope and do things that are outside of the box and weird and different. And that's what excites me creatively. So I tend to come up with things that are like weird and require a video. And Kim says, it's the only single crochet I'll work. Yeah, I know you don't like single crochet. Single crochet is your nemesis. And so you must prefer the waistcoat stitch because of its look, especially when it comes to color work for crochet. It gives such a nice clean edge. If you were to work the color work of the hat that we looked at, I can pull that back up again if we want to take a peek at it. If you were to just work that color work not in waistcoat stitch, it just is not as clean because the shape is not as hidden. If you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about. It gives you a cleaner color work. It just is a dense fabric. So if you it works for hats, but if you're putting it into a sweater, you have to be careful of the material you're using. It needs to be something extra drapey. You also want something that's not heavy and that takes up space, that's fluffy, because you don't want to be able to see through those stitches either. And you have to be able to work it at a loose enough gauge that it's a big stitch, but wool works best is what I'm really getting at. Wool or certain types of acrylic like this one. So let's see if I can stay. I don't want to get too far behind you guys because I don't want to miss your questions as they relate to what I'm talking about. Let's see. Marquita says she struggles with the waistcoat stitch so much. And Kim's saying voluntarily. Is the fabric lighter because single crochet can be dense? It is not. It's not. It is the same density, if not denser, because you're going down into the single crochet stitch instead of working on in the top loops. So you have more rows. You have less rows. Sorry. You have less rows per inch. They're really like squished down on top of each other. Which I can show with my design as well. And it would also be bigger and gappier. Are you talking about with what would be bigger and gappier, Kim? I did wait too long to catch up to that comment. So let me show you what I did. I crocheted this cowl. This is crochet, you guys. This is crochet. How cool is this? So I'm going to have a tutorial coming out on how to do this awesome stitch pattern in crochet. It is a series of slip stitches and waistcoat stitches with a fun little technique to get those V's. This came from a hat and cowl set that I knit and designed. So this is knit, this is crochet. Sometimes I just impress myself with my ability to transfer one over to the other one. I can't believe how, am I off screen here? I can't believe how closely these two resemble each other. And if I could hold them still, right? I don't think I could have got any closer than that. So let me tell you where this came from, because the stitch pattern in knitting is not mine. It's not an original idea here. Oh, and real quick, let me catch up with Kim before we get it. If it was done in regular single crochet and not waistcoat, it would be bigger and gappier. Yes, absolutely. Because when that waistcoat stitch goes down into the center of the stitch before it, it's tight in there. It's not as loose as those top two loops that tend to pull on each other. So yes, absolutely. Marquita says, Amanda, that is so pretty. Thank you so much. You nailed it. Yeah, it took just a handful of swatches and then it worked. I can't believe it worked. And the coolest thing is that this fun little pattern, I did a veer off of it in knitting and created the bird foot beanie, which it was a hat I made for my partner and he loves it and he takes it everywhere. So I don't know where it is, but it means I can create a crochet version of it now. I did get that requested after I designed it. Everyone was like, well, where's the crochet version? It's coming. I figured out how to do it. So let's go back and talk about the knit. Let's see, is it this one? Here we go. So how I came across the stitch pattern in knitting is this. This is the Audition Shawl by Michelle Hunter. And a couple years ago, she released this as kind of her final crochet along before she took a break to spend time to be a grandma. And this was a mystery while it was coming out, which is a ton of fun. You guys know that I love mystery alongs, which is why I'm hosting a mystery crochet along that starts in 2 weeks. And so when it's kind of like an asymmetrical stitch sampler shawl. And the enlarged picture there to the right, I fell in love with this stitch pattern when we got to it. This is just the cutest little thing. I love the way it worked up in my shawl. I should have grabbed my shawl for our live. I didn't even think about it. I have it in my little container where I store my finished makes until it gets cool enough to wear them. So this stitch, this is a $6 knitting pattern that I also have linked below. I can't forget to say that as well. This stitch I found, I Googled, okay, what is this stitch pattern called? Because we did a stitch sampler. It is called Garter and Goals. And it's a stitch pattern that you can find on a knitting website that's kind of like a open source stitch dictionary, really. And so I was like, I need to use that in a design. And I had spun, I like to get the Paradise Fibers Fiber of the Month Club boxes, and this amazing Polworth blend came one month undyed, and it came with walnut powder. So I used the walnut powder to naturally dye the fiber, and then I spun it into this yarn. And then I was like, I am using that stitch pattern to design a cowl and hat set, and I had just enough yarn to do both. So I did this cowl, which I just love. So this is the knit out of hand-spun Polworth wool, and this is the hat out of the same hand-spun Polworth wool. So I loved this set so much. I went out and I photographed it, and I'm like, this is going to be a great pattern. I think it's got awesome texture. It's great for, my hand-spun was a little heavier than a worsted weight, but you know, you can slightly adjust, you know, it would work just fine for this basic stitch premium. Great. I posted pictures like saying, hey, this is coming soon. And someone went, that looks just like this other pattern. And I was like, oh no. And this is what happens when you design with stitches out of stitch dictionaries. If you take them absolutely by themselves, you run into this problem. The shawl that I showed you used the stitch pattern as a striped section of the shawl in a sampler. So that would make the pattern unlike anything else. But because I used just the stitch pattern by itself, I will show you the pattern that is available. So if you like the knitted hat, this is a pattern that you can get. And so I never released mine because I just didn't feel comfortable putting out a pattern that is just so similar to somebody else's pattern. So this is the L'Arbre hat. It is a knitting pattern that's available in a $6.99 book. I found it available on Amazon, and I believe there's 25 patterns in it. So it's a great deal for the book if you like the hat. I didn't really thumb through it and look at any of the other patterns. I just was like, wow, that looks just like the hat I designed. And if it was in a different weight, I probably would have released the pattern. But because the weights are so similar, I decided to just keep it and not release it. I don't know how she decreased her hat. That's the biggest thing with something like this. I thought, oh, I'll be able to get away with using the exact stitch pattern because you have to decrease in pattern, and that is not something that's super simple. So maybe nobody's done it yet. And also it would be difficult for someone who liked the pattern but wanted the hat to figure out on their own if they're not interested in doing any of that. So this is how I decreased my hat. And I don't know how she decreased hers. And I didn't do a knitted brim because I didn't know if I'd like the way that it looked. I thought it would be fun to have the garter, there we go. I thought it would be fun to have the garter roll right into a garter brim. So I did a rolled garter stitch brim, which is where you knit several rows of garter stitch, and then when you fold it in half, and then you end up kind of knitting the beginning stitch and your current stitch together around to eliminate the beginning stitches, just to kind of like knit it together basically. And I like how that gives you a nice fit to your head without being suffocatingly tight. It also eliminates the cast on being on your head because it's up in the brim. So you get a nice, like super stretchy brim. So yes, that is where this came from. And so then when the basic stitch came in the mystery box, I was like, this color, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Then I realized it's very similar to the cowl that I already made that I couldn't release. So let's go ahead and talk about how did I create the crochet version? And also look at the yarn. So let's do this. I had to put this in the dryer. Do you guys see that? So this is why Basic Stitch has an anti-pilling version and this premium version. So this premium version, as you can see, I wouldn't even know, like, is this even pilling? Like normally with wool, what happens with the agitation is it creates a little ball. So you have like little balls all over your sweater. This is like fraying. I guess it would just be like another version of pilling, but that happened after it went through the dryer because I don't have that on my swatches at all. My swatches just got to lay flat to dry, and they dried just fine. No fraying whatsoever. But this one would not dry. I wet blocked these on Thursday, and this morning it was still soaking wet. I was like, what is going on? It is a little bit of a denser fabric, right? So like if I hold it here, it's not flopping. It's sticking out completely. Even though I went up, no, I didn't. Not for this one. For the actual pattern, I might go up. I'm still swatching for that. I used the recommended needle size because I saw that this was so open and loose that it would be fine for this. And it is a little tight. Let me go ahead and put it on for you guys. There we go. See, there's no drape. There's drape. There's no drape. This is because of the stitch pattern. This is because of the density of that waistcoat stitch in between the slip stitches. So this did happen. But yeah, so I was talking about the fraying. So there is fraying because I threw it in the dryer to dry it. I don't know. It should be pretty easy to get rid of with a depilling device. There are brushes you can use, but I like to use the little device that Addie sells. I should have brought that out here too. It's like it's got a little fan in it, and there's an edge, like a protective edge, and the fan sucks the fraying and pilling bits behind the protective piece, and there's a razor in there. So it cuts it all off, and I've used it to depill my older non-superwash wool sweaters, and it works like a charm. So I would probably take that to this. So let's see. Let me catch up in chat. Marquita says, it is a cute set. Thank you, Marquita. That's not too bad. The pilling, yeah, it's really not. And I am someone who is not used to throwing acrylic in the washer and dryer. So I don't know if this is normal or not with other acrylics, but that did happen with this one. And Marquita says a gleaner would clean it up pretty nicely too. I think so. I haven't used gleaners, but I've seen them used. So I absolutely think so. So when it came time to imitate the knit pattern, I had seen that waistcoat stitch, and I knew that that's what I wanted for that, what they call the goal part. It's so hard to show, because that's what gives you the definition of that line. Now in the knit version, how you get that string is when you knit, if you're not familiar with knitting at all and you only crochet, when you knit, all of your stitches are live at once, which makes it really easy to follow knit patterns because you have to address each stitch on your needle. Where with crochet, you can skip around and literally do whatever you want, go in any direction. Knitting, it's a little more restricted with what you can do because you have all these live loops going. You put your yarn in the front, your working yarn, you put it in front of your work, and then you slip past those stitches and you continue working in pattern so that in a future row, you drop down and you pick it up when you knit. So it's like a string left behind, and then after a couple rows, you come down, and they call it a knit one below. You grab that loop below, you pick it up, and you knit it into your current row, and it gives you these goals. So for crochet, you can't slip past your live stitches. So what I decided to do for that instead is I ran an extra string along that row only. So if we turn this inside out, you can see in between the goals, there are these strings. And so that is when they're not in the front. So while I was crocheting the row that I wanted those slipped stitches that you do in knit to show up, I just basically wove an extra string either in front of my stitches or behind my stitches. So it would be move it in front, do your waistcoat stitches, move it in back, and then do your slip stitch in the back loop onlys. So this is an entire vertical column of slip stitch in the back loop only. This is ribbing. Where? Let's see. So it is stretchy on those areas where there's ribbing. I'm trying to get my hands just on that only and also see if you guys are seeing it. So it stretches out there. That is important because, as you know, with crochet, single crochet is taller than slip stitch, but because you're doing it in the back loop only, which creates ribbing, it's looser. So it ends up pulling itself up to the height of that waistcoat stitch. So while you're working the pattern, but before you get to the border, the edge kind of ripples because you've got these single crochet heights and then these slip stitches. But as you work subsequent rows, it continues to lift up that back loop only. Let me catch up in the chat there. Blind Stitches Creations. Hi, everybody. What's up? Hello. Thank you so much for joining me live. Oh, and Ditmer Knittery. Hello. Thank you so much for joining. I just watched your video the other day talking about the 100% wool yarn label that didn't say it was superwash and you tried to felt with it. And I was like, oh my goodness. I have recently come across some yarns that just say wool on the label. And then when you go to their description page on their website, it says superwash, which doesn't matter for me because I'm not felting with it. And I'm okay with working with non-superwash wool. But for someone like you who is felting with the wool and it's not labeled as superwash, how frustrating because you don't know until it's too late. But thank you for joining. Marquita, so you made crochet floats. Wow. Yes, I made crochet floats on purpose with an additional string. Now, I will say that I have a Stitch Dictionary book that I got off Amazon that has knitting and crochet in it. And it's not one of my favorites because it just has a lot of basic stuff that's in my favorite crochet Stitch Dictionary. But there is a section in the back that uses this technique with 2 different colored yarns on purpose. The charts are really funky and hard to read because it's showing you how you weave that second strand of yarn in and out of your work to create really cool designs. So that is also something that helped me get this idea. The one thing I will say though, where is these skeins of yarn, this shape, I don't know if you've worked with this one or yarn that comes in a shape like this, specifically this style, right? There's the other skeins like you see with like Red Heart Super Saver that don't look like this on the end. These do not pull well from the inside at all. They hide the ends on purpose. You get nothing but yarn barf when you pull them out. And when you start working from the inside, it collapses into this weird oblong ball and becomes a mess. I know because that's what I did for these floats. I was primarily working from the inside. Bad on me. I should have been working from the outside. But then I would have also had to pull from the inside to run those floats. So that is the one thing that is a little unfortunate about this shape of yarn with a pattern like this one. But you could always get 2 balls, although you really only need one. It only took 1 skein of yarn to make this cowl, less than a skein actually, because I still have this much left over after my first skein, and I did not, I used it to also do my swatches. So 1 skein is enough for this size. Everybody's saying hi to each other. Awesome. So back to the patterning. So the border is just slip stitch through the back loop as well. So I just did several rows of slip stitch through the back loop because it does give you that garter stitch look. I originally played with doing single crochet in the back loop, but I didn't like it and it didn't resemble the garter stitch as well as these slip stitches through the back loop. So that's what I decided to go with. And I was a little nervous about putting that in between the waistcoat with the float sections, but it, like I said, it ended up working out well because it stretches so well. And you can kind of see it at the top here where it dips a little bit, just a little bit. You can see the top edge after all that slip stitching is done. It's nice and straight, but when you look at the actual patterning, it like rises and then dips again. And it does that all the way throughout, but it's very, very subtle. You would have to be a crocheter to even notice it. And there's a good chance that if you wore this out, that people would think it was knit anyways. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this, and I am going to go ahead and make the matching hat as well. And then this one I can actually release because there is not anything else out there like it that I know of. If you've seen anything like this, let me know so I'm not duplicating. I don't want it ever to look like I'm trying to make something that somebody else has already made before. That's not my intention. Just like with the knit hat pattern that's basically already available in a little slightly different form. When I come up with an idea for a design, I really do search to see if there's already a pattern available for it, because some patterns that use basic stitches out of a stitch dictionary are so simple that there's a really good chance that someone else has had the same thought, like, oh, I really love this pattern, I want to put it on a hat. The only problem is that the hat pattern that is out there does not refer to the stitch as garter and goals at all. And so I would have never known to look up the name of their pattern to see that it was already existed. And it's impossible to see every pattern that's out there. So I did want to just mention a side note about that. It was super unintentional. And as soon as I found out, I kept it for myself. So if you've seen anything like this in crochet, let me know and I will keep it to myself. But I have not. So I think I can move forward. I want to do a tutorial on how to do the actual stitch itself, and then another tutorial on the cowl. And then I don't know if I'm going to combine that with the tutorial for the hat or not, because the hat will have special decreases that I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet how I'm going to do them. It should be very similar to the decreases on this hat. I charted it, so I should be able to just follow the chart, substituting this crochet stitches that I used to imitate the knit stitches. Just one kind of final note on this, because knitting is such a thinner fabric and it's not as dense, this one has a lot more drape. That's really the difference between the two. And you may be able to, it has more drape, but not much more, right? But it is noticeable. So you might be able to get away with using a different fiber content and gain a little bit more drape. This is the Lion brand Basic Stitch Premium, which I reviewed in this video. So if you went with something a little more natural, you might get a little more drape, especially if you went with something like alpaca or an alpaca blend. If you are not sensitive to alpaca, that would lend very good drape to this. But I wouldn't recommend that for the hat because you don't want your hat to be too drapey. So yeah, that is that is everything that I had to talk about. So now we can just chat. So what have you guys been up to? Tell me what you're working on. What has been gaining your interest lately? Also, if you have any other questions about what we talked about, definitely throw those out there. But let me know. What have you been up to? What have you been making? Let me know. Um, Kim says, yep, that's why I caked mine. It was a pain to center pull. You know what, Kim? I did think about that with the Lion Brand skein. After the fact. Like, I didn't think about it before, obviously, but after I did it, I was like, you know, if I caked this would have been fine. I think that is a great thing to mention in the video because I do plan on using this yarn. I still have 2 skeins of it left, enough to make another cowl and the hat. I should actually go ahead and cake it up and mention that I recommend doing that if you have a skein that looks like this. And Marquita, me too, Mocha, or start from the outside, but caking is so fun, so I usually cake. You know, it's funny because I've seen people caking acrylic yarn, and I always wondered why, because I'm like, well, it's already in a form that you can work from it, but now I know not all of them are, and especially if you like to pull from the center, you cannot. The only thing is you need a jumbo ball winder for that, right? Sometimes these acrylic balls can come in giant skeins. Excuse me. If you get a 200-gram or bigger skein of yarn, you'd have to, excuse me. You'd have to cut it into 2 cakes. Otherwise, it won't fit on the ball winder, which is okay. It's extra ends to weave in, but who likes weaving in extra ends? Not me. Absolutely not me. All right. Ditmer Knittery. I'm going to talk more about 100% wool on my next video. I've been holding my tongue. You know, this reminds me of when I was going to school. So I went to school online, like right after I separated from the military. I got my GI Bill, and I was pregnant with my son. I had a 1-year-old daughter. And if you're unaware, the GI Bill is an amazing benefit. They pay for your school, and they give you a monthly check for like living and stuff. And so it was a great time for me. And I was going to school for business. And part of that was like, there was like some business history classes that I had to take. And the professor that I had left the research papers like super open-ended. Anytime he did that, I was like straight to crafts. I was like, if I'm going to study business, I'm studying the crafting industry. Let's go. So I did a research paper on Singer sewing and how they used to be door-to-door. They like started as door-to-door sales. And I did a paper about the way they marketed their company and grew their company like back in the day. I also did a paper on, how spinning actually introduced women into the workforce. Like, it's amazing, right? That's where spinster comes from, right? Before spinning machines were invented. And then when looms were invented, it like changed the game. But yeah, I'm getting sidetracked. 100% wool. I did a paper on false advertising in the yarn industry because there have been lawsuits out there about fiber content. And I know one of the biggest ones is the Debbie Bliss cashmere. There was a lawsuit about the false advertisement of the percentage of cashmere in the yarn because other yarn companies were getting concerned that like, how are you able to offer this at such a low price? There's no way. And they went out and had it tested and sued them. But in my research at one point, there was a yarn that was tested and 100% confirmed to have rat hair in it. It had rat hair in it. Oh, and the paper had everything to do with like when you're importing materials from foreign countries and they have different laws, that it can be hard to 100% know what your supplier is putting in your item. Like if you just rely on what they tell you, oh yeah, this is cashmere, then you think you're selling cashmere, but like where is your business responsibility to actually test what they're sending you and who's liable for that misadvertisement? So it reminds me of that. I feel so grateful that I got to go down those rabbit holes while I was studying business because that's what I was interested in, the business of this industry, I don't want to go work for a Fortune 500 company. I want to crochet at home. Let's see. Marquita says, I am working on a triangle shawl for my sister using yarn, merino nylon from Mason Create Things. Oh, awesome. So Merino nylon. I do enjoy merino nylon blends a lot. That's your like basic sock yarn, whether it's superwash or not. Typically they superwash treat it because of durability of socks, but I also use those yarns for shawls as well. That sounds gorgeous, Marquita. I do love a great triangle shawl. I am sure that your sister is going to use it. And I believe I saw this shawl on your last episode and commented about it. It's your own design, right? I think I remember that one. It is gorgeous. And Kim says, I mention it in my next video, LOL. Are you talking about what you're working on? You're saving it for your video? I have maybe you're talking about winding skeins. I have a regular cake winder and that skein fits on it. Yeah, this one should. It's only 100 grams. Most yarn winders are created to make a 100 gram ball because so most yarn winders are used to wind up yarns that are sold in hank form. You know, the skein, also called a skein, but it's technically a hank when it's in that large circle, twisted up into that beautiful little fancy looking version of yarn. I don't know why it looks so much fancier. Probably because that more expensive yarn is typically sold in that fashion. So yeah, a Swifting yarn winder are usually used for that, which they usually come in 100 gram put-ups, although I have seen them in 200 gram put-ups. So it's not a hard and fast rule. As the rat hair deliberate or was the warehouse just gross? That I don't know. It didn't go into detail about the percentage of rat hair in the fiber content, but I feel like testing it wouldn't have just been a random one-off hair, right? Like, there had to have been a substantial amount for it to show up, right? Like, oh my goodness. I don't know. I'd hate to speak for them. I wouldn't even understand the process of going out trying to collect rat pelts. Like, maybe it was just gross, but it would have had to been pretty gross for there to be that substantial amount showing up. And also it makes for a great headline, right? Like, oh, marketed as cashmere, but it's really rat hair. Like, that grabs people's attention. So it could have been something that was definitely blown out of proportion, which is also why the percentage was probably not listed. It just said contains. But yeah, gross. I don't want rat hair in my yarn. The only hair that I want in my yarn is mine by accident. And I don't even want that there, but I'm okay with it. Kim was. Okay. I'm still working on the craft samples. Yeah, I wish you great luck getting into your craft fair. When you announced that you were invited to apply, I thought that basically meant you were in. I didn't realize that didn't mean you were in. I was like, oh, yes. You know, I don't do craft fairs very often. I have done them in the past. They can be a lot of fun. There's so much work and can be super stressful. But when I did do craft fairs, I was like slowly to moderately successful at them. So, excuse me. That was a lot of fun. And it is great to see people get excited about your makes. So I wish you luck. Definitely make some of those wind spinners. I saw the one that you shared in your video. I am seeing those hyped up everywhere, and they look like they're so fast and simple to make. And I know that I did say local team colors. I also meant sports. So like, I don't know who your local NFL team is, but hit that up. I know I'm in Washington, and a lot of the things that I sold at craft fairs were Seahawks colors and University of Washington colors, the purple and gold or the lime green and blue. Especially wind spinners. I don't know how your local area is, but out here, people around football season always fly those Seahawks flags and decorate. Like, people paint their house. Like, it's gotten pretty crazy around here. So definitely make at least one or two of those, because if you have one or two, you might get orders for more. Because that's another thing that happened frequently too, is people at shows would be like, oh, well, I like this, but can I custom order it in different colors? So yes. Marquita says, yes, it's my design and thank you. Yeah, girl, it's good. It's a good one. I like it. I can't wait to see it fully finished. It's beautiful. And I think it works really well with the hand-dyed yarn. Sometimes it can be hard to design with hand-dyed yarn because of its variegation. You lose stitch patterns. So you have to find this fine line between interest that doesn't get lost. Dittmer Knittery. I was just thinking the other day, no one ever says put up anymore. Thank you. Yeah, nobody really does say put up. I think it's something I picked up working at my local yarn store. So I worked at a local yarn, I work at a local yarn store now, and I worked at a different local yarn store previously. I love working at yarn stores. Right now, I'm working from home at my local yarn store. So I am like online support, kind of. I mostly just do their email newsletter. And, but like for a good handful of years, I worked inside the local yarn store, and I was even assistant manager for a brief period of time. And so there, you learn a lot being in a space like that, especially when you work at a store that is owned by a yarn company, a yarn manufacturer and distributor. Like sitting down with the owner in meetings, like you learn so much about the industry and about the proper names for everything. I didn't know that there was a difference between skein and hank. I called hanks skeins, and I also called these skeins. So it was nice to be in a place where I could learn proper terms. And then when you're unsure and you just want to describe it in general, yeah, put up. So that was great. And that's where I started learning so much about fiber content. I also was really getting into spinning at the time. So, you know, the biggest thing when you're working at a yarn store as a retail sales associate, people come in asking you like, what is the best wool-free yarn that I can knit a shawl with or crochet a shawl with? They come in with very specific questions. So you have to know everything in the store, all of the fiber contents, why they wouldn't want it, and if it's okay, if it's blended. You need to know all about yarn substitutions. And I mean, like, you don't have to, but it makes a really good sales rep if you do. So I just like head down, started studying everything, working with everything, touching everything. And that's kind of how I've gotten to really love reviewing yarn and how I started reviewing yarn on these Saturday lives. Oh my gosh, Kim, my brother would love you. So growing up, we were allowed to pick whatever favorite NFL team we liked, because my dad is not a Seahawks fan. He is a 49ers fan. And my middle brother, I have 3 younger brothers. The one in the middle is a hardcore Steelers fan. And so he would absolutely love that. So I'm in Steelers Browns country. So that's a really good idea. And Steelers fans are hardcore. And plus black and yellow is cute. So I'm making a Titans one for me because that's my team. Also West Virginia University and Ohio State. Ohio State is my brother's favorite college team. That is so funny. Yeah, I think those are great ideas if you find the time. I mean, definitely don't kill yourself until you know that you're in for sure, unless you want to open an online shop. But they're like, those wind spinners are blowing up. I've got plans to make a Halloween one because I just can't resist it. And who knows, if I love it enough, I might actually make a collection of them, because I have a front covered deck, and just like covering them in Halloween wind spinners for Halloween. Oh, I just got a great idea. So my kids want to decorate the front yard as like a Minecraft Halloween. They have been, they're 5 and 6, the 2 older 2. They're obsessed with Minecraft right now. And there are some like Minecraft raps that have come out that they listen to nonstop. So I told them, let's try to do Minecraft Halloween. I could make Minecraft Halloween wind spinners, like put a little creeper on the bottom, or they're like, they love those Endermen. Oh my gosh, that would be perfect. The only work I did at the LYS was carrying the yarn to the register. Carrying the yarn to the register is dangerous. So the most dangerous part of working at a local yarn store is, especially if they offer you a discount, your whole paycheck goes right back into the store. I mean, it's really best for the both of you. But stocking yarn or carrying yarn to registers and checking people out, just seeing all the yarns, it is so inspirational, and it makes you want to buy every single yarn. And it makes you drool at the yarn all day. So Don't recommend if you actually want to take your paycheck home. But if you're already spending money on yarn, you're already doing it anyways. Marquita, yes, yes, yes. On the variegated yarns, it's so easy to lose the pattern. That's why I tend to go with simple stripes or a semi-solid with speckles. I love a good semi-solid with speckles because you can get away with a little more stitch patterning that doesn't get lost. With the exception of like some cables can get really lost with that. And Marquita says, Mocha, I loved your wind spinners. They're so cute. They really are. I think that's going to be great for your application. So we are at about an hour now. I have to go pick up my daughter. It was great to hang out and chat with you guys. Thank you so much for joining me live. We've got one more Swatchfest Saturday live until the Lift Your Spirits Halloween Mystery Crochet Along starts. It's the following Saturday, and I am pumped, you guys. I got confirmation that Nancy, the dyer behind Schmutzerella Yarns, will be joining me live for the kickoff, and we're doing a yarn giveaway. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for the pattern. I'm so excited for the launch, the live launch, and to be interviewing Nancy, and it's going to be an overall good time. So yes, that is in 2 weeks. Next week, I'm going to be doing the third and final yarn from my mystery box, which is Vanna's Choice. But then after that, it's Mystery Crochet Along time. I'm so excited. Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Lori says, a fun live today. Thank you so much. And Marquita too. This was great, Amanda. Oh, thank you so much, Marquita. Oh, Lindsay, you stopped by. Hi and bye. MCal hype. So much hype. All right, guys. I'm gonna let you go. I hope you have a great rest of your Saturday, and I'll see you next Saturday. Until then, happy crafting. Bye.